$74 billion vanished in exactly 24 days. And the craziest part? It was all masterminded by one man who convinced the entire world he was a genius. To understand how the seventh largest corporation in America evaporated into thin air, we have to travel back to the neon-lit, greed-is-good era of the late 1980s. Houston, Texas. A massive energy company named Enron had just been formed by a merger. To the outside world, Enron was a boring utility provider, moving natural gas through thousands of miles of cold, iron pipes. But inside the mahogany-walled executive suites, a dangerous plan was brewing. A man named Kenneth wanted more. He didn't want to just run a utility company, he wanted to build an empire. And to do that, he needed a visionary. Enter Jeffrey Skilling. Skilling was a brilliant, hyper-ambitious McKinsey consultant with a radical idea. He looked at gas pipes and didn't see infrastructure, he saw financial contracts. He proposed a concept so audacious it sounded like science fiction: Enron should become a financial market for energy. They would buy gas, package it, trade it, and sell it like stocks. Kenneth was mesmerized. He hired Skilling and gave him complete freedom to build this new kingdom. But Skilling had one non-negotiable condition. He wanted Enron to use a highly controversial accounting method called mark-to-market. Normally, when a company sells a product, they record the profit when the cash actually lands in their bank account. It is simple, transparent, and honest. Mark-to-market accounting is none of those things. Under this system, the moment Enron signed a long-term contract, say, to provide gas to a factory for 20 years, they were allowed to estimate the total future profit they might make over those 2 decades. And then, they wrote that imaginary number on their financial books as actual cash earned that very day. Let that sink in. Enron was allowed to log millions of dollars in profit based on nothing more than their own optimistic projections. If the deal failed 5 years later, they were supposed to write it off as a loss. But Jeffrey Skilling had no intention of ever showing a loss to Wall Street. He built a culture of pure, unchecked adrenaline. He created the notorious performance review system known as rank and yank. Every year, the bottom 15% of Enron's employees were publicly humiliated and fired. This created an environment of sheer terror. Traders would do absolutely anything to keep the numbers up, to book more imaginary deals, and to secure their multi-million-dollar bonuses. Enron's reported revenues began to skyrocket, moving from billions to tens of billions. They were named America's most innovative company by Fortune magazine for 6 consecutive years. Wall Street analysts fell over themselves to praise the stock. The company's headquarters in Houston became a temple of excess. Executive floors were paved in rare Italian marble. Corporate jets flew executives around the globe for lavish, adrenaline-fueled vacations. But behind the glittering glass facade, a black hole was expanding. The projected profits from their massive international deals were not materializing. A multi-billion-dollar power plant in Dabhol, India, was a complete disaster. The local population couldn't afford the electricity, and the project sat idle, burning massive amounts of cash. A high-tech venture to trade broadband fiber optic capacity failed completely. By normal accounting standards, Enron was bleeding to death. But wait. It gets worse. Instead of admitting their failures, Jeffrey Skilling and his hand-picked chief financial officer, Andrew Fastow, decided to perform financial alchemy. Fastow created an intricate web of hundreds of shell companies, known as special purpose entities, or SPEs. He gave them names inspired by Star Wars characters, like Choco, LJM, and Raptor. The plan was terrifyingly simple. When Enron had a massive investment that was failing and losing millions, Fastow would transfer that toxic asset to one of these shell companies. In exchange, the shell company would give Enron cash, which was actually backed by Enron's own inflated stock. On paper, Enron looked incredibly healthy, showing consistent profits and zero debt. In reality, the debt was just being swept under the rug of these hidden shell companies. The deception was so deep that Andrew Fastow was actually running these shell companies himself, pocketing tens of millions of dollars in management fees while serving as Enron's CFO. It was a massive, illegal conflict of interest that Enron's board of directors willingly chose to ignore. By the year 2000, Enron was a ticking time bomb. The company was functionally bankrupt, surviving entirely on the continuous inflation of its stock price. To keep the stock rising, they needed to find new ways to generate fake revenue. They turned their attention to California. In the early 2000s, California deregulated its electricity market. Enron saw an opportunity for pure exploitation. Their traders began deliberately shutting down power plants under the guise of maintenance, artificially creating energy shortages. They plunged major cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles into rolling blackouts, trapping people in elevators, shutting down traffic lights, and cutting power to hospitals. Why? Because when the supply of electricity dropped, the price of power skyrocketed by over 800%. Enron traders caught on tape laughed about the misery of ordinary citizens, telling each other to burn, baby, burn, while they funneled billions of dollars out of California's economy. It was the absolute peak of their hubris. But the laws of gravity cannot be ignored forever. In early 2001, the dot-com bubble burst, and the stock market began to slide. As Enron's stock price fell, the entire system of shell companies began to collapse. The SPEs were backed by Enron stock. When the stock dropped, the shell companies could no longer cover the toxic debts. Andrew Fastow's structures were imploding. In August 2001, Jeffrey Skilling did something that shocked the financial world. Just 6 months after being promoted to CEO, he abruptly resigned, citing personal reasons. He sold tens of millions of dollars of his own stock, leaving behind a company on the brink of destruction. Shortly after, a brave Enron executive named Sharon Watkins wrote an anonymous memo to Kenneth, warning him that the company was about to implode in a wave of accounting scandals. The press began to ask questions. Journalists at Fortune magazine wondered how a company that claimed to make billions of dollars had so little actual cash flowing through its bank accounts. The illusion was shattered. On October 16, 2001, Enron was forced to announce a massive third-quarter loss of $618 million and a $1 billion reduction in shareholder equity. The SEC launched an official investigation. Panic swept through the Houston headquarters. At their accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, shredding machines began running 24 hours a day, destroying tons of files to cover up the fraud. But it was too late. The stock price, which had once peaked at $90, collapsed to less than $1. On December 2, 2001, Enron officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It was, at the time, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history. The human cost was devastating. Over 20,000 employees lost their jobs in an instant. Even worse, Enron had forced its workers to invest their retirement savings into the company's stock. When the stock crashed, $2 billion in employee pensions vanished into thin air. Elderly workers who had dedicated their lives to the company were left with absolutely nothing, while the executives walked away with hundreds of millions in bonuses. The legal fallout was historic. Arthur Andersen, one of the top 5 accounting firms in the world, was convicted of obstruction of justice and collapsed, putting another 85,000 people out of work. Andrew Fastow pled guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Jeffrey Skilling was convicted of multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy, receiving a 24-year prison sentence. Kenneth was convicted on all counts but died of a heart attack just months before his sentencing, escaping the prison cell that awaited him. Enron became the ultimate symbol of corporate greed, a stark reminder of what happens when regulatory bodies look the other way, and charismatic leaders are allowed to trade reality for illusion. If this massive corporate fraud shocked you, you must watch our video about how Lehman Brothers triggered the global financial collapse of 2008.